Hello YouTube, this is Redneck Reloader. I'm hoping the sound is okay on this video. I usually wear a microphone. I don't have one on today, so I'm just going to wing it. But I wasn't planning on making a video this morning, but I got out here doing some work, and I decided I'd go ahead and make one. I'm processing some brass. I guess you would call it range pickup brass. I don't live anywhere near a range. People just go up into the mountains and shoot. But I tried to make a little bit of a range. I was actually trying to draw people up there so that I could get some brass. So what I had done was took a nice area up there off of a old strip road for a strip mine that's not in operation anymore, and set up some targets and a nice little shooting area. And I picked that spot because it's pretty wide open, kind of off the beaten track, and there's a nice old gravel road there so that my brass is not landing in the weeds all the time, and I can find it and pick it back up again. And it's starting to pay off. This is right after Christmas. This is actually New Year's Day, and for the past week or so I've been going up there and doing some shooting when I was off, and I actually found some brass. There were some people that had been up there shooting in the area. So I've got a little bit of 9mm over there. I've got some 223, and I got a nice little pile of 45 ACP, which is what I really needed the most because I have a lot of 9mm and a lot of 223, but I was almost completely out of 45, and I was thinking about buying some, so I'm actually glad I found that pile. But this morning, I'm just sitting out here processing it. I went through some of the 223 already, but I got a few cases left, but that's what I was going to make this video about. I've got my tools out here, and I was just going to kind of show you how I process my 223. I've got my press set up with my decapping die in it and resizing. That's a small base resizing die from RCBS, and I've got my Hornady case lube, and I'm just going to kind of show you all how I go through this. So let's begin. All right, so I've got about 8 pieces of 223 brass here. When I was up there and I was finding this brass, there was actually a bit of a pile of 223 there. Not a lot, maybe 30 rounds. Gosh, excuse me. It looked like maybe somebody got a new AR and went up and just, dumped a magazine and testing it out or something. Unfortunately, the downside to where I've made my little range area is it is an old strip road, and there's a lot of four-wheeler traffic and stuff, people riding up in the mountains, and that 223 brass had been run over a few times, so I didn't get a lot of it. The pistol ammo was all in great shape, the 45 and the 9mm, but 223 had been worked over pretty good. So I kind of picked through it, and because to me that stuff's pretty valuable. I don't want to have to buy it if I don't have to, and every piece, if I can save it, I will. So, and this was all good looking brass, brand new stuff. I knew it was brand new because the empty box was laying up there where they had opened them. So I wanted to try to save what I could, and I didn't get a lot. I got maybe 12, 15 pieces of it. And I'm not even sure all of it's going to be able to be saved. Some of it's a little deformed. And so I'm just going to try it this morning. So I've got them all lubed up, and I'm going to run them through my my die. Now, I didn't wash any of these off or anything. All I did was just picked them up and wiped them off the way they are. So got the first one in my die. So I just go ahead and lube it and run it on through. And that one went through pretty good. I'm going to test them here in a few minutes. I'm just kind of showing you what I'm doing as far as resizing first. Now, like I said, some of these are pretty dinged up, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to resize them or not. I'm going to try them. This is one of the probably the worst that, see if you can focus it. It's been run over. It's a little flattened, and actually the end of it was a little worse. And what I did was take a Phillips screwdriver and pushed it down in there and opened it up a little bit. So I really don't know if this is going to be able to be resized or not. It's a little bit of an experiment. I'm just going to try it. So let's see what happens. Well, didn't get stuck. It looks pretty well shaped. We'll check it out later with a case gauge in a few minutes. So I'm going to take these remaining ones and just run them through and resize all of them and decap them, and then we'll check them out a little bit closer. All right, I'm back. When I was decapping that brass, I noticed some of it had a little bit of moisture in it. I got a little drop or two out. So what I did with it is, after I sized it all, I wiped it all down real good, get the lube off, and I have a kerosene heater out here in my shop with an old cast iron skillet that I can put on top of it. And I just threw all this in that skillet and got in there and heated it up good and got all that moisture out of there, because I don't want them to be wet when I store them. What I like to do with my brass, I get it all prepped and ready to load, make sure it's sized properly and everything, and I put it inside a container. I got a few of them, but this is one of them here. And I store it in there, and then when I take a notion to load, I can just pull it right out of there. I don't have to measure it or anything. I know it's good to go, and I just throw it in there. So I wanted to make sure this was all dried and stuff. But this is all that brass I sized, and as you saw, some of it was pretty bent out of shape, crushed, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm not even sure it's all going to be saved, but I'm just going to try it. So what I'm going to use here is a case gauge, and I'll just show you. I've got a few tools laid out here. That was part of this video, so I'm going to show you how I do this stuff and what tools I use. I have a case gauge here for 223, and that is from Wilson. I don't know, it's pretty old. It's got this number here, 92139. I'm kind of thinking maybe 92 was the year it was made. I don't know that for a fact, but it's got a little surface rust on the outside of it, but the inside's nice and clean, and it works real good. So I just use that to check them. Then I have a trimmer here. It's actually a pocket reamer. This is pretty old. It's made by Pacific. I paid $1 for this on eBay, and I just use that just to, if the primer pockets have been crimped, that just takes a crimp out of them. And then the last thing I'm using is a little chamfer deburr tool, and as you can see, that's made by Bear. Same people that made my press. That's the old box. I gave a couple bucks for that on eBay. I really don't remember how much it was. Maybe 10 at the most. I don't remember, but not a lot. None of this stuff cost a whole lot of money. I think maybe, I honestly don't remember with that case gauge. I think maybe 15 bucks at the most. I think more like 10. But anyway, just a few little pieces. You have to do a little bit extra with 223. If I load ammo and store it for my AR, I want to make sure it works. So I don't mind taking a few extra little steps with this stuff. But first thing I'm going to do is just check all these and make sure they plunk in the case gauge okay. So drop it in, and if you're not familiar with a case gauge, you can kind of see there's a little groove here in the top, and what you want it to do is kind of be in between. Let me see if I can get something little to point with here to show this better. The instructions say it should be kind of in between. This is the lower part, and then this, you can see these lines here trying to do this through the camera, but it's like a groove. It should be in between those two. It shouldn't be sunk in, you know, further than flush, and it should not be standing above this outer, wider part of the gauge. And as you can see, that one fits in there real nice and drops out good. The other part of this gauge is flip it upside down and set it on a level surface, and you're looking for the length to make sure it's not too long. And it's the same way. It should not be above that outer higher section of the gauge. It should be in between there. My understanding is this outer part is the 1.76, and if it's perfectly flush, it's a 1.75. You can go a little shorter than that. I believe the actual spec calls for like 1.74 is the minimum on these, but so I've just pretty much looked to make sure it's not sticking up. If it's flush, I'm happy with that. So that's a good case right there. Plunks in there good, and it's not too long. So that one goes. Next thing I'll do is make sure that the primer pockets are not crimped. And so far with these, I haven't found any crimp. These were actually 223s and not 5.56. But I just run this through there a few times just to make sure the pocket's nice and cleaned out and it's not crimped. And I'm not going to have any problems seating anything in there. And then the last thing I do is just chamfer the case mouth, because they really need to be chamfered for the bullet to seat in there well. When I trim everything to length, I use a Lee Quick Trim Deluxe, and it trims it to length, but it also chamfers and deburrs. In this case, where this is a piece that does not need to be trimmed, then I'm just going to chamfer the inside with this tool. Just once again, stick it in there, give it a few twists. Not got any brass shavings, and it's got a little chamfer in there. Actually do a little bit more on that. It's kind of hard doing this through the camera. And that looks pretty good. So I just knock out those little shavings, and now that's a good piece of brass that goes in the bucket. So a little time consuming, yeah, but it's not too bad. I don't process thousands of pieces of this stuff, and I don't have to go through every step every time. This is just new brass to me. This is some brass that I've set to the side because it's going to have to be trimmed. It's a little long. It's stuff that I've done in the past. If you look, they're already chamfered and deburred because I have trimmed these once before, and I've already chamfered them once. This is totally new stuff to me, so I'm having to do a few extra steps on that. So what I'm doing is, if the length is okay on this, I'm just chucking it in my bucket ready to reload. If it's too long, I'm putting it over here in this tray, and a little bit later I'm going to get out my Lee Quick Trim and trim those back. So right now I'm just checking all of them. That plunks in there good, not too long. That one's good. So even this brass, I didn't keep track of the ones that were really badly deformed, but you saw some of this brass was in pretty rough shape, and it sized just fine. I haven't found a piece yet that didn't plunk right in there and chamber good. Now, I did have one piece that was a little long. I was going to trim it, but the rest of these are all coming out real nice. So this one, when I switched from doing pistol to rifle, this is some of the stuff I had to do, was get a few extra tools here and take a few extra steps, but it's worth it to me. Part of it, when I started reloading, I knew all along that I was planning on reloading for my AR, 223, but I wanted to start doing pistol for a while first and kind of learn the basics, which I'm glad I did, because everything you do with the pistol rounds you have to do with rifle, but then there's these additional steps for the rifle stuff. So and it's flush. So these are all good. Every one of these sized just fine. So now I'm going to take the rest of those and clean out the primer pockets and chamfer them, and then I'm going to throw them in the bin and say they're good to go. And maybe I'll go ahead and trim those other ones that are too long, and I'll go ahead and show you how I do that, and then everything is done. I'll show you all the steps, all the prep I do. So let me stop this, and we'll come back and I'll set up my trimmer. Alright, we're back. I'm trying to work on a good camera angle so you guys can see this. I'm switching presses. This is my rock chucker press. Right now it's pretty much dedicated to trimming brass. I've used it a few times, but you know, I like my Bear. That's what I started out on, and I really like it. But there's nothing wrong with this. It's a perfectly good press. But the main reason I use this for this Lee Quick Trim is it's vertical, and you know, my Bear press is slanted, and I found when I used this with my Bear press, the brass shavings would kind of build up on the side of the die, and it would cause problems. So it just works a lot smoother in this. So that's what I keep this set up. I keep a 223 shell holder. I've got an extra one that I just keep in here, so when I need to trim some brass, I can just throw this in there and go. I could just leave this Lee Quick Trim in there, but my shed's outside, and I try to protect my dies. I don't want to leave stuff out. I'm afraid it'll start rusting and stuff out here. It's unheated out here and stuff. So every time I'm done with my dies, I take them out, kind of wipe them down clean. I store them in a drawer. So, but if I was doing a whole lot, I'd just leave it set up. But anyway, this is some of the brass that I had set aside that was too long, and they're all ready to go. I've already done the primer pockets. I've resized them. I made sure they work in the case gauge well. So I've got one here, and there we go. So as you can see, it plunks in there very nicely, and it sits in there good. Forgive me, I'm coming at a completely different angle here with the camera. It's just kind of got me weirded out this morning. But you can see it drops in there nice. But if you look at the other side, it's sticking up a little proud there. And I want that to be down flush. Now, I don't even have my calipers out this morning for trimming this brass. Since I got this case gauge, I just usually use this because I know if that's down flush, it's going to be fine. So that piece is a little long. So I'm not going to go into great detail about this Lee Quick Trim Deluxe. I made a whole video about it and broke it and had to do a follow-up video about it. So if you're really interested in it, you can watch those. So, but I just load my brass in and give this a few turns. I see people talk about doing this online, and they'll say you get on there and you do a couple of turns. In my book, my directions for my Lee Quick Trim, it says at least 5 turns. You know, of course, that's kind of going to vary on how long your brass is. So I usually just go ahead and give it about 10, 15, 20 turns just to make sure I've got enough. I'd rather just do it a little extra than to put it in there and then have to take it back out again and do it again. So that one's not bad, but it's still standing just a little bit proud. It's a little over exaggerated because you can see I'm holding it in. The proper way to use this gauge is you're not supposed to push it in like that and measure it. You're supposed to set it flat on a table, because as you can see, this will drop in slightly below flush. So if I gauge it by pushing in on it like that, I'm actually going to make them trim them a little bit shorter than what they need to be. So I know you guys really can't see this, but when I just set it on the table like that, and look, it's just barely sticking up. So I didn't quite take enough off of it. So I'm just going to put it back in and give it a few more turns. So this is not the quickest and most efficient way to do this. If I were doing a whole lot of rounds, I'd probably get some kind of power trimmer, but I don't do a whole lot of rounds. You know, what have I got here? 8 pieces, 10 pieces that I have to trim here out of a bunch that I processed. There we go. Now that's nice and flush. I can get it focused in. See, that's setting nice and flush now. So I know that's fine. That's 1.75. I don't have to get my calipers out and measure it. I know that will work. So this is how I trim my brass. That one's a lot shorter. That's a lot closer. It's not going to take too much. And this also chamfers and deburrs it. So I do like that part of it. When I'm done with it here, I can put it right in my bin to reload, and it's ready to go. So just check. That one's good. It's nice and flush. Not sticking up. So that's all I do. That's the little extra steps I have to take before I load 223. Just wanted to kind of show you guys some of that since I'm not doing it this morning. So kind of an impromptu video, but hopefully a helpful one. So God bless all of you, and thanks for all the support.